I have one of those terrible headaches and I'm headed home. According to the VA's experts, they are brought on by the metal plate in my brain. I don't think their findings are sound. The headache began around 5 months ago, the same period that my 3-year-old wife started working as a receptionist for the local law business. That plate has been there for 10 years. I'll give you some history now. I come first. My name is Bobby Turner. In the 1960s, I served 4 years as a Marine. You guessed it. Some idiot fired a mortar at me. I'll call them whatever the hell I want. Recall that it's me who has a plate inserted into my head. I spent a few months in several hospitals before being released and returning to the farm. This should be brief and sweet. I received disability benefits. Not really enough to get by, so I returned to my studies. I work for the county now as a heavy equipment operator. In my barn behind the home, I have a backhoe and a grader. I usually use the grader to level up the county's sand roads on days like today. However, it was a work day. That's what we termed reviewing all the new county, state, and federal requirements while seated in a classroom. After nearly 2 hours of listening, I decided I needed to lie down. When I informed my supervisor that I had to leave, he did not protest, even though he knew about my medical condition. As I previously mentioned, I don't believe that plate in my skull is the source of my migraines. Something is wrong with the force. My wife made the decision that she wanted to work 6 months ago. I balked. Upon my father's passing, I inherited our property and house. We had more than enough money with my employment and disability, but she persisted, and I gave in. She was hired as a receptionist at a legal firm. I forewarned her about the company's founder's son. He was someone I knew in school, was of course tall, attractive, and wealthy. He was a true ladies' guy, though. He boasted about his victories all the time and dated all the attractive girls in school. He was walking around in the locker area, nude, boasting about his gigantic J son and how no female could resist it. We both played sports. Rich students go to college, poor youngsters go to battle, as the song puts it. That's precisely what took place. He was a lawyer, and I had a plate in my skull when I got home. My spouse and I got into another fight last night. My goal is to begin a family. She'd like to hold off. For what length of time? She's not sure. But while we speak, she never seems to glance up. I believe I have identified what the issue is. Let's now discuss my wife, Sue. It was 4 years ago when we met. After graduating from high school, she went to work as a factory receptionist. She wasn't a virgin, she had lovers. Not a problem, I wasn't either. Before I proposed to her. We dated for more than a year. She informed me that it her desire to live on a farm, even though she had never done so because she had grown up in a city 2 counties over. Owning a horse, maintaining a garden, and living in the country. She desired 4 children. She seems like the ideal woman for me. After our marriage, the first few years were wonderful. We rode a lot together since I got us 2 horses. We even began going on overnight excursions and setting up tent in the woods. She then began to express a desire to report to work. I had suspicions, but I was unable to identify what it was. Let me tell you that I weigh 190 pounds and am 6 feet tall. I'm seen to be attractive, and I make an effort to maintain my fitness. Sue has lovely 34 billion breasts that are quite sensitive, blonde hair, blue eyes, and a height of 5 feet 8 inches. She weighs around 115 pounds. Each of us has a lovely automobile. I have a Ford pickup, in fact. As I mentioned before, I can sense the disruption intensifying as I move closer to our farm. As I round the bend, I realize why. My residence is facing the blue Corvette of the attorney. I coasted to a stop, cutting the engine. I have a 1911 Colt .45 in my glove compartment. I remove it and give it some space. Today is the last day of this. I enter the den with ease by going through the side door. In our bedroom, I hear them. A letter addressed to me sits on the coffee table as I turn to head down the hall. I take it up and read quietly. Bobby, please know that you were once the object of my true affection. I apologize for all that has happened, but it is what it is. About 8 months ago, I went shopping at a Memphis mall and ran across Paul. We had a few beers and he brought me to lunch. I was interested by all those rumors about his Johnson. Our destination was a Ramada Inn. I became engrossed. He got me employed when the position at his office opened up. Several days a week we would have private conversations at his house or in his workplace. We spent those late evenings and Sunday afternoons shopping with him. We experienced love. He offered me to accompany him when he heads to Miami to deal with a customer. Upon our return, I will move my belongings into his residence and file for divorce. You will have time to calm down since we will be gone for around a week. I am aware of your sometimes irrational temper. Bobby, I truly did love you, and I sincerely apologize for hurting you in this way. Please make an effort to comprehend. Sue. She's going to discover just how stubborn I can be and how much I'll never get it. I slip down the hallway and linger at the bedroom entrance. Paul is treating her like he owns her. I tap the door with the .45's barrel. At the same moment, they both glance up. Paul leaps to his feet, his flying everywhere. "Bobby, you really frightened me. We'll get ready and head out after you put down that gun." A smirk appears on his face. Paul simply stopped talking and stood there as I spoke with my wife. "You're not going to shoot anyone, you see." I shot the first round into the wall and over his head. Sue let out a scream. "Just let us go, Bobby, please. I have no desire for anything and will divorce you. Please let us leave." In the den, I read your letter. "Is his large Johnson the focus of this?" "Almost all," said she. When I turned to face Paul, he's smiling. That really got on my nerves. He had his Johnson dangling between his knees. I took a shot that was about an inch above it. That's when the commotion really started. Paul was pulling on his Johnson and yelling. It has shrunk by around 2 inches in the last few minutes. He must have yelled harder and dropped on his knees next to the bed when his hand gripped, so it must have hurt more. He was bleeding profusely. Then he began to throw up. He'd had a hearty breakfast. He turned onto his side and muttered something about my forefathers. Sue had her knees bowed to her chest as she sat on the bed. "You read the letter?" she questioned, staring right at me. "Yes," I answered. I wrote the phrase about his enormous Johnson because he made me. But was that truly all there was to it? Sure, that's all he wanted you to know. He enjoys taking pride in it. "Bobby, please, an ambulance is what I need." He sobbed. I responded, "No, you don't, you need a grave," as soon as he turned to face me. My subsequent shot struck him in the left eye. His remaining brains were lying on the ground behind him. Sue became silent for a moment. "I never gave you sloppy or even seconds, Bobby, please. On the days we did, I would come home feeling like I had a headache or something. Anything, and everything I could think of to keep you from learning about us. What is this lady who is cheating thinking? Perhaps if I forgive her, our happily ever after will come to pass." I returned her grin and responded, "Thank you." My next blow struck her forehead. I brought them out to that Corvette after wrapping their corpses in linens from the bed, naked in the passenger seat. I assembled them just as I found them. I drove his keys out behind the barn after discovering them in his trousers pocket. Was hidden from view in case a car passed past. I cleared the space and threw open the windows. To remove the stench of vomit from the air, I had to open a can of air freshener. I filled a garbage bag with all the clothing and paper towels and tossed it in the van on top of them. I then proceeded to the barn and turned on the backhoe. Everything was covered up and buried in less than 2 hours. I reasoned that there was no use in talking to them. The demon refused to listen to them. I returned home and gave the sheriff's department a call. I called Sheriff Parker and informed him I had discovered a letter claiming my wife was having extramarital affairs with that Paul, the attorney. I asked him for his advice. "Look, Bobby, give a divorce lawyer a call and start the process. Serve them as soon as they return. It is preferable to avoid situations like these as soon as possible." I hung up and gave the next county's lawyer a call. I scheduled a meeting for the next day. She made copies of the letter after I took it with me. Since it was written by Sue, it was put on display. When they got back, she would have the documents ready. I wrapped everything Sue had in plastic trash bags and placed them in the garage next to her car. I was back grading county roads the following day. The force was once again as it was. You guessed it, though. They took a week to return. The law office called me after 10 days to inquire if I had heard from my wife. The sheriff's office then dispatched an investigator to get a statement approximately 2 weeks later. I forwarded him to my lawyer. I showed him all of Sue's junk that was waiting for her beside her car. He never got back to me. After I got off work one night, the feds came by, perhaps a month later. They asked some thought-provoking questions. "Is Jose Gonzalez someone you know?" "Not ought I to," I answered. "Emmanuel Gonzalez, perhaps, not him either." "What's the deal with this?" Jose Mel's father was the customer Paul was traveling to visit in Miami. Last year, Paul had defended him in a drug trafficking case, but during the trial, Paul made a mistake. He posed a query for which he was unprepared, and it let Manuel, one of his clients, into serious trouble. He was found guilty and given a federal prison term of 50 years. Jose requested that Paul file an appeal on behalf of his kid. That ought to have raised suspicions. However, because Paul was ill and unable to travel, Jose sent $100,000 to the account of Paul's company and urged him to come to Miami to resolve the matter. Like a fool. Paul chooses to kidnap your wife with whom he had been having an affair for nearly a year, believing he will receive more money for a significant appeal. Paul used his credit card to pay for the fill-up of his Corvette while he was in town. We believe that after that, he came to this area, picked up your wife, and the two of them left for Miami. The Colombians must have arrived before they made their gas or meal stop because we are unable to locate another gas receipt. That's our assumption, however. What is this Jose's opinion on the matter? Nothing. About a week after they vanished, he checked himself into a hospital, and 6 days later he passed away. We never had the chance to ask him about it. I suppose that implies I can part with whatever she owns. In the garage I have stuff in trash bags. If you would like, feel free to go through it. That won't be required. For our records, we would appreciate a copy of the letter she left. I answered, no problem. They departed after I gave them a copy of the letter. That was almost over 30 years ago, and ever since I buried Sue and Paul beneath what is now my hog pen, I have not sensed any disruption in the force. That brings an end to the narrative for today. Please leave a comment below, and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Your backing enables the algorithm to promote my work more widely. Remember to click the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. It truly enables me to continue telling you new stories. I appreciate you watching, and I hope to see you in the future video.